Okay, welcome back. So in the previous video we covered some tips for sketching out your game characters. I ended up settling with this solemn little character with big, juicy round eyes. Now hopefully you've come up with your own design. Note that what you make now is in no way carved in stone. You can very well change how your player looks midway through your game's development. That sometimes is part of the journey, so no pressure. If you feel like what you made is so-so, just move on and come back later. With that said, I now want to paint this character. Basically fill in with color, clean up his outline, add some little details, and get him ready to be imported into the Unity game engine to then be animated. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, there are many ways you can go about coloring your character. You can go for something cartoony with thick black outlines, for a more realistic painterly style, and so on. The options and style will vary for each artist. For the purpose of this course though, I'm going to go for a painterly textured art style. Now, unlike a static illustration, we want to then animate this character, so we'll need to make sure to paint each body part we wish to move independently on a different layer. But first things first, let's define a light source and then sketch out some shadows as helpful guides. I'll create a new layer called Sketch Shadows, and then for my light source, draw a quick little sun, circle, or light bulb. You can do this anywhere, but remember that for the next characters you paint, it's best to be consistent with the light source, especially if the characters are all part of the same scene. Now I'll draw mine above my character, and then sketch some shadows in the opposite direction of that light source. So under the eyes, at the bottom of the head, the belly and legs. Of course, keep all this loose and ugly. We'll be erasing it all anyway, so don't waste more time than necessary at this point. With that done, I'll disable those two sketch layers and fill my background with some grey colour. Painting over that feels more relaxing to the eyes, and is also useful if you're painting a very bright looking character. I'll enable my sketch layer again, and then make a new layer called Head below those two sketch layers, so I'll still be able to see them once I begin painting. On it, I'll block out the colours for my character's head. Now again, you can use whatever brush you like. I'll just choose a round one with transparent tips. The way you get this sort of brush is by first choosing Photoshop's default hard round one, and then head over to its settings and turn on Transfer. Now, my top-down shooter will take place in a dark, scary-looking world. As a result, I want my player character, the hero, to be a bright white, which will contrast nicely with the shady environment and evil, dark enemies. So I'll grab a whitish color and use that to block out my player's head. Now, since my character's eyes are so large, I think it would be great to have them blinking from time to time. So I'll block those out on a new layer in Photoshop that I'll call Eyes. This way I'll be able to move them independently of the head. Next up, I'll create a new layer called Body and block that out as well with a slightly darker color than the head. Then the arms and finally the legs. And there we go, we've blocked out the character's colors on different layers. Now as you can see, we've so far not paid any attention to shadows, highlights and details. At this point we're just trying to look for a cool color palette on which we can base our character on. Now note that in Photoshop, stuff drawn on top layers will render in front of stuff drawn on lower layers. So for example, if the body was above the head, you could just left click on that body layer and drag it under the head one to fix that quirk. Okay, with that said, I'll now block out the character's shadows. Selecting the head layer, I'll hit I on my keyboard to grab the eyedropper tool. And using that, I'll select my head's color, and I'll grab a darker version of that color in the color palette menu, and use that to block in my shadows. Now note that we're still keeping things loose and messy at this point, just using the sketch shadows as guidelines for where the shadows should be. I'll grab my eyedropper tool again, select my normal head color, and now grab a lighter shade of that color, using it to paint some highlights. So since my light source comes from above, it's only right that the top of the character's head should be lighter. And now you can repeat that blocking in shadows and highlight phase for the other body parts. Not forgetting of course to select the right layer you wish to paint on. So for example, if you want to paint shadows for the body, make sure to select the body and only then paint. Awesome. It's now time to smooth out these ugly looking shadows. So for now, our character is made up of a light grey color, a darker grey color for the shadows, and an almost pure white for the highlights. To smooth things out, I need to grab the color between my dark grey and light grey and use that to blend the two colors more smoothly. So my light grey is here and my darker one is here, So I'll select the color that is here and use that to smooth out my head. And then repeat that process as many times as you want. So I can now select the color between this new gray and the light gray and smooth things out even more, and so on. The more you do this, the smoother things will look. Also, if your character's head is round, make sure to paint your shadows accordingly. Don't paint things flat. Give it a slight curvature to give your head that 3D look. And of course, the same applies for the highlighted part of your design. Just smooth things out by grabbing the in-between color, and you can then repeat that process for the other body parts. The character has really come to life now. He looks almost ready to be imported into Unity and then animated. Before doing so though, it's time to add some final little touches. For example, some white specular dots to the eyes and maybe even head and body to give the design that wet, squishy feel, and has many little details as you see fit at this point. You can also grab a soft round brush and use that to highlight the character with some extra light source. Maybe your character will be wielding a torch, so why not give his whole head a slight orange glow? You can also create a new layer under the head one and use that soft hard round brush to paint a dark shade around the head, which will make it pop out against any colored backgrounds. Once that's done, don't forget to merge the head layer and that newly made one. And of course, you can do this for every single body part. And there we go! You now have a character that is ready to be imported into the Unity game engine, something we will do in the next video. Until then, just take your time painting your character, make sure to paint things nicely on different layers so that we can then separate those pieces, cut them up in Unity Sprite Editor, and move them independently when animating. And again, don't spend dozens of frustrating hours trying to get your character looking perfect. You can always come back later and change things around. Okay, with that said, see you in the next video. Cheers!